Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of The Death of Art. We're in New York City at the Outsider Art Fair. This thing has been going on for 30 years, and we're going to see how it's evolved and whether outsider art is even relevant anymore. But before we go in, we definitely have to check out the outsider of the outside art world. I would like to introduce you to my friend Chuck.
Hi, how are you?
So you've been outside the Outsider Art Show for how many years?
2007 was the first time, and that was over at the Puck Building in Soho.
They didn't let you in, or are you just making
I just never really pursued it that much. Since I was small, I just always liked to draw. So I've tried different galleries around New York, but again, didn't really pursue it that much and just continue to make art. They're on the inside now. I am the true outsider.
Here we have a guy that is almost a household word, or at least was in the music world. His name is Daniel Johnston. He did these really weird performances that were distributed on cassette. He died in 2019, but left some of his art. This guy was a real outsider. This is the real thing. A lot of what we're seeing here is kind of folky, primitive. It's really not outsider. But this, I would say, captures the mood of early outsider art. This piece of art comes with a magnifying glass, and I don't think it needs it. I'm just seeing a lot of really small dots. There's not really any content that I'm missing, but it's very decorative. I have a Turkish-made bowl, which is absolutely beautiful, that this reminds me of. These are actually really good. It says in the blurb, these erotic bondage drawings were rendered by an anonymous British soldier attached to the intelligence unit in one of the British occupied zones in Berlin and the Rhineland at the end of World War II. So what I'm looking at is actually incredibly skillful art. The guy has training, he has a very steady hand. I don't know how it qualifies as outsider art, but that's what we're here to find out, how this whole industry, and it is an industry now, has evolved. These works have kind of an instructional quality to them. They're almost showing you what you should be doing next. This is Joe Coleman's work. He is a well-known New York City artist. He does incredibly detailed, this you need a magnifying glass for, I'll tell you. Beautiful work. This is an homage to Hunter S. Thompson. In typical outsider art fashion, it tells a story. A lot of outsider art was really storytelling, and they weren't worried about impressing anybody with their technique. Joe has a very individual style, hyper detailed. There's no real word or genre for his work, which I guess keeps him as an outsider, as well known as he is. This is where the definition of outsider art gets really iffy. We're at a retrospective of the Psychedelic Solution, and there's a ton of great work here. But to call it outsider art is really a stretch. These guys, they were serious commercial artists who more had a psychedelic bend and were flowing with the whole craziness of the 60s and 70s. Not quite outsiders, they were very much insiders. On the other hand, I just did find a piece of outsider art. This is blotter acid. Each of these suns is actually 4 hits. So if you really want to go to the other dimension, you take all 4. Otherwise, if you're just going out with friends, you can split it up. This is extremely well crafted. The guy has a very deep understanding of what abstract art is. Texture, volume, it's all there. I don't know if he did this without training. I have no idea who GIUSeppe is, but this could hang in any gallery in Soho and I'd give it a thumbs up. But don't just take it from me. To have a clear understanding of what we're looking at, we have to ask Z, international superstar. Z, what do you think? What does it say to you?
Particularly about this one is it just reminded me the poor neighborhoods around Bombay, and it's like a garbage. It brings sadness because it's like us not caring about the planet.
I get that vibe from it as well. I feel like it's an environmental statement.
Yeah.
So you can really glean a narrative out of this, and it could be either completely abstract or completely subjective, depending on your point of view. This is where outsider art really fails sometimes. We have here these wood carvings, which are sort of painted. It's just basic folk art, and it's not very good folk art at that. The problem with folk art is it really is an outsider because it comes from a tradition. Outsiders tend to come from completely outside the field and they challenge our expectations, whereas folk art doesn't really.
It's all about space, and USSR being the first man in space, which is Yuri Gagarin. It's a dragon, but also it's about time and infinity, which is number 8.
There's a certain kind of outsider art, which I haven't really seen here. This almost fits the bill and comes pretty close. There's a phenomena from meth heads called Frankensteining. And after hours and hours and days of smoking methamphetamine, they start putting weird things together, taking apart the toaster, turning it into things. And they do this for hours and hours and hours and sometimes days and days and days, and create sometimes very magnificent, bizarre pieces. This almost fits the bill, but I'm looking for better. This is the kind of territory the death of art lives for. We're in a small section of one of these booths that's called Unknown and Undefined. And a lot of these things look kind of like you could have bought them at a truck stop, found them in a flea market, but it really pushes the boundary of what's art and what's not. God knows where they came from, but this stuff is exciting. About 100 years ago, various artists, psychiatrists, intellectuals began collecting art from insane asylums. They found it raw, they found it very challenging, and it inspired later movements like Dadaism and so forth. Later, in the 70s, people picked up on that theme and called it outsider art. It was really born in the 70s, was still pretty edgy in the 80s, and in the 90s it became an industry. Nevertheless, we found some really cool stuff here. Some of it was an outsider art, but it's a loose definition, and we had a blast, and we learned something. There's some good stuff still to be found in the art world.
Yeah.
Please like, please subscribe, and please ring the bell.